which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Janice Marie Hunt, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Sunday, March 29th, 2026 issue of the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. To make headway against Trump, governor gives corporation a try. Earlier this year, as President Trump hosted a breakfast meeting with the nation's governors, he declared that he would only look to escalate immigration enforcement in states where we're wanted. Then he glanced across the room to Governor Kathy Hochul of New York. ICE would not be surged there, he said, unless Kathy asked. The exchange caught the governor off guard. She recounted later, but it reflected the growing influence and unusual rapport that the governor, a centrist Democrat from Buffalo, has developed with Mr. Trump. While many Democratic leaders have adopted a confrontational approach to dealing with the president, Ms. Hochul has opted for cooperation when possible. The relationship has given the governor unusual access to the White House to make her case for New York. He can call me anything he wants, she joked in an interview. As long as you're going to tell me you aren't going to come to New York City, I'm like, wow, I'm jotting this down. This is really good. Ms. Hochul said she has tried to foreground areas for collaboration, from rebuilding Penn Station to cracking down on transnational gangs, while still using her bully pulpit to criticize the Trump administration when appropriate. The latest example of her strategy paying off came on March 20th when the governor met with Dr. Mehmet Oz, the administrator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and emerged with a deal to protect the health care of 1.3 million New Yorkers. My approach is personal appeals and personal. She no arguments, she said. I've done that for the last year now, and sometimes it's successful, and sometimes it's not. Last year, the governor, who is seeking her second full term as a governor in November, used her good cop, bad cop strategy to try to persuade Mr. Trump to drop his opposition to congestion pricing. She made a personal appeal during a White House visit in February 2025, listing some of the program's benefits. When that didn't work, she successfully sued to block the administration's interference. But perhaps the most telling illustration of the possibilities and limitations of her approach came this month, when Mr. Trump's border Caesar, Tom Homan, paid an unusual visit to the state capitol in Albany to meet with Ms. Hochul, the details of which have not been previously reported. The mood was cordial as Mr. Homan was ushered into the governor's offices in the state capitol, a meeting that many interpreted as an attempt to reset after the deaths of 2 American citizens at the hands of federal agents in Minneapolis, and the subsequent removal of Kristen Noem as Homeland Security Secretary. Ms. Hochul said she began with a statement of her values, her opposition to open borders, her belief in the importance of a pathway to citizenship for those already living in this country, her commitment to public safety. She urged Mr. Homan to release students currently detained, cancel a proposed detention center in Chester, New York that has drawn local opposition, and guaranteed that the president's promise not to surge immigration agents in New York without her acquiescence would be honored. Federal officials have since walked back some of their plans in New York, including the Chester Project. A handful of detainees, including Dylan Lopez Contreras, a high school student from the Bronx, have also been released since Ms. Hochul and Mr. Holman met, although it was unclear what, if any, influence the governor had in the actions. Ms. Hochul also asked that the relatives of Nur Ayman Shah Alam, a nearly blind refugee who died shortly after being released from federal custody, be given temporary visas to be able to mourn with family members in New York. Mr. Shah Alam was held in detention for over a year pending trial on assault charges until he was released in Buffalo on February 19th. Border Patrol agents were told in advance of his release and picked him up at the holding center. Several hours later, they left Mr. Shah Alam in a Tim Hortons parking lot, 5 miles from his home, on a frigid Buffalo night. He was later found dead. Mr. Holman listened as Ms. Hochul made her case. Then he made one of his own. Mr. Holman asked that the governor allow ICE agents into New York prisons and jails, according to two people familiar with discussions, arguing that the agency could more easily round up people accused of criminal wrongdoing without risking the kind of public confrontation seen in Minneapolis. Mr. Holman's request was not surprising. In February 2025, he pressured Eric Adams, then the mayor of New York City, to allow ICE agents into Rikers Island. The New York City Council successfully sued to block the move. Since then, he has repeated calls to let us in the jail, including a Fox News interview days before Alex Preddy, an intensive care nurse, was killed by immigration agents in Minneapolis. For Ms. Hochul, the request is fraught. Leaders in New York City, a key power base of Democratic support, contend that giving ICE access to its jails would lead to the removal of people accused of minor misconduct, not just the dangerous criminals. Democrats in the state legislature have proposed legislation that will prohibit any collaboration between state or local officials and immigration agents. Ms. Hochul has taken the middle ground, insisting that the state should assist federal immigration officials in criminal cases where a judge has issued a warrant. But she has also proposed barring localities from formally assisting ICE and banning agents from so-called sensitive areas like schools, hospitals, and houses of worship. She has also increasingly spoke up against civil immigration enforcement, particularly the separation of families. Ms. Hochul's stance on immigration reflects some personal evolution on the issue. In 2007, during her campaign for Erie County Clerk in Western New York, she vocally opposed Governor Eliot Spitzer's order to provide driver's license to undocumented people. Ms. Hochul said that she would provide driver's license to undocumented people, but called for their names to be sent to the county sheriff as possible violators of immigration law. She changed her mind several years later. She recently said, after seeing the realities of some of the first widespread ICE raids and the data that showed that Mr. Spitzer's measures brought down traffic accidents, we in government are called upon to be open to new facts and circumstances and not be subordinately captive in a position once held, she wrote in an essay for the Times-Union in 2019. Her position on immigration evolved further once she became governor. New York State saw more than 200,000 migrants flock to the city at the beginning of her tenure, straining resources and political will. At the peak of the influx, Mayor Adams bemoaned the burden and criticized former President Joseph R. Biden Jr., a fellow Democrat. Wow. Ms. Hochul was more pragmatic. She allotted roughly $5 billion for imminent needs and lobbied the administration to expedite work authorizations. After Mr. Trump took office for his second term, Ms. Hochul became more outspoken against the president's deportation agenda, which she says not only undermines the rule of law, but also offends her as a human being. She visited a nutrition bar facility factory in Cato, New York, where ICE arrested 57 people speaking out for families that have been separated, and met with those affected by the wave of deportations, like an 11-year-old boy from Long Island whose father was taken into custody by immigration agents in front of a Home Depot. The governor's stance on deportations have been considered a potential vulnerability with moderate and conservative voters who had initially supported much of Mr. Trump's immigration agenda. Ms. Hochul's Republican opponent this November, the Nassau County Executive, Bruce Blakeman, has strictly defended Mr. Trump's immigration agenda and pledged his county's support for ICE. But with the immigration crackdown falling in disfavor among many New Yorkers, even on Long Island, Ms. Hochul may find herself on safer ground with voters, especially given that she frequently sides with law enforcement in state-level debates over justice and safety. Still, there may be limits to what Ms. Hochul can try to accomplish. At a certain point in her meeting with Mr. Homan, it became clear that there was little left to say. Jackie Bray, the director of state operations, described the meeting endgame with a trace of political inavailability. We did not agree with things they were asking, and they did not agree to things we were asking, she said. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Battle over unit and police department reemerges in New York City. Not long after Mayor Zoran Mamdani took office, one of his campaign vows to change police department protocols seemed poised to become reality. A like-minded colleague, Chai Asi, the Democratic Socialist councilman from Brooklyn, was set to take another crack at forcing the department to shackle its strategic response group, a specialized unit charged with maintaining order during large-scale demonstrations, which has been a source of controversy for its aggressive tactics. But Mr. Asi backed off after the area outside Mr. Mamdani's mayoral residency in Manhattan became the scene of an alleged terrorist act this month. Two men who have expressed support for the Islamic State were arrested after one was seen hurling a homemade bomb into an already tense anti-Muslim protest close to Gracie Mansion. Police officers, including SRG members, quickly responded. The bomb did not detonate and no one was injured. Now, Mr. Asi has reintroduced his bill, the so-called Curb Act, on Thursday. It would ban the unit from responding to First Amendment protected activities like protests or parades for purposes of crowd control and formally end the use of more draconian crowd management methods by the police department. Mr. Ossie said the attack outside Gracie Mansion had been a frightening but isolated incident that had no real bearing on the bill he was putting forward. He noted that the officers who arrested the two would-be bombers were not assigned to the Strategic Response Group and said he did not believe the unit was particularly necessary at the event. And he added that he pulled the bill earlier this month because he had not wanted the legislation to be convoluted and mistaken for what had happened at Gracie. I think flooding demonstrations with SRG officers doesn't make New Yorkers safer from targeted attacks, Mr. Ossie said. Donna Lieberman, the executive director of the New York Civil Liberties Union, which has partnered with Mr. Ossie on the bill, went a step further, saying the legislation was as critical as ever. An aberrational violent act should not be leveraged as pretext for militarizing and targeting peaceful protest activity, she said in a recent interview. Mr. Ossie has introduced the CURB Act twice before, but has not garnered enough support to advance it. This time, the circumstances would appear more favorable. The bill has at least 22 co-sponsors, and the mayor supports the general idea behind it. But the attack this month may still complicate the bill's passage. The police commissioner, Jessica S. Tisch, is dubious about the measure, nor does the council speaker, Julie Menin, support it, according to a person familiar with the speaker's thinking. Ms. Menin has concerns about how the police department would respond to attacks like the one at Gracie Mansion this month or a shooting at Midtown Manhattan last summer that left 4 dead if the SRG is constrained. The police department declined to comment on Wednesday, citing an inability to review the language of the new bill. Bill Bratton, the former police commissioner under Bill de Blasio, announced the unit's creation in 2015 as he watched other global cities, including Paris and Mumbai, contend with attacks. In an interview on Wednesday, he said that it would be a tragic mistake to dismantle the unit and turn over its portfolio to officers with less specialized training, especially at a time when conflicts abroad are increasing tensions here in New York City. Shame on the city council, shame on the mayor. If they in fact attempt to do away with it, modify it in some significant way, Mr. Bratton said, because the rest of the department is not trained, equipped to deal with large-scale demonstrations. Sam Raskin, a spokesman for the mayor, said last week that Mr. Mamdani was committed to disbanding the unit and that he looked forward to reviewing the bill. The mayor has so far embraced a cautious approach to police reform. This month, Mr. Mamdani announced the creation of a community safety office to overhaul how the city responds to some 911 calls, taking initial steps toward honoring his signature public safety campaign policy. But the office is a pared-down version of the full-fledged agency Mr. Mamdani had planned with a smaller budgeting than promised. The mayor vowed during his campaign to disband the SRG, which he said had cost taxpayers millions in lawsuit settlements, plus brutalized countless New Yorkers. Since taking office, he has rarely mentioned the unit and has taken no visible steps toward eliminating it. In the days after the Gracie Mansion protests, Mr. Mamdani insisted he was discussing ways to disband the SRG, but the nature of those conversations was not clear. To that end, Mr. Ossie's bill could provide a degree of political cover for the mayor on an issue that may unsettle the city's more moderate voters. The SRG has been a topic of intense debate since the summer of 2020, when it came under fire for its heavy-handed response to the racial justice protests that convulsed the city after the killing of George Floyd in Minnesota. The unit, which was established in part after a terrorist attack at a French satirical magazine in Paris, responds to high-intensity protests, along with shootings, bank robberies, and other significant events, according to the police department. Since its inception, critics have argued that the unit's counterterrorism roots have led its officers to take a militarized approach to policing, bringing aggressive tactics to bear on peaceful protesters. During the protests of 2020, officers charged at demonstrators hit them with batons and boxed them into enclosed areas without cause, a tactic called kettling. Those episodes resulted in a settlement between the New York Attorney General Letitia James and the police department, in which the department agreed to limit its use of the SRG to respond to protests. Mr. Ossie's bill looks to further codify portions of that settlement into law. But police advocates say the specially trained unit is essential to keeping New Yorkers safe during civil unrest. The department said that the SRG is already governed by Ms. James' settlement and that the government is only deployed during specific high-level episodes. The SRG was involved in 1% of the more than 4,000 First Amendment activities that the police responded to in 2025, the department said. City Hall and police officials have said that the mayor and Commissioner Tisch are in conversation about the SRG, and Mr. Mamdani's administration has said it is examining ways to shut down the unit operationally. The administration is currently working with the police department on how to do so in a manner that both improves safety for New Yorkers and protects First Amendment rights, Mr. Raskin, the City Hall spokesman, said. Mr. Ossie said on Tuesday that he had not spoken directly to the mayor about the legislation, but that he had been in contact with his administration. The two have had a somewhat rocky relationship after Mr. Mamdani took the step of intervening to block the councilman from launching a primary challenge against Representative Hakeem Jeffries, the House Democratic leader. Mr. Ossie acknowledged there was a lot of work left to do for the bill to become law. I'm committed to that work, he said, and I have a coalition behind me that is also committed to getting this bill passed, the finish line. Portrait of Trump at war, impulse and ultimatums. President Trump was fresh off the golf course and his fury was building. It was March 21st, and as he settled back into his Mar-a-Lago estate for the evening, he was reading another news account about how, for all the military success the United States had in Iran, he had yet to achieve his political objectives. At 7:44 p.m., the president made his frustration known with an extraordinary ultimatum. If Iran did not reopen the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours and allow much of the world's oil and gas to flow through, he would bomb Iran's civilian electric power plants. It was the kind of attack that could constitute a war crime under the Geneva Conventions. But just hours before the Monday deadline expired, Mr. Trump delayed his threat by 5 days, easing fears of an imminent escalation with profound military, diplomatic, and economic implications. Still, he warned that we'll just keep bombing our little hearts out if Iran would not make a deal, and as the week progressed, he made new threats that left allies off balance and spooked the markets. So on Thursday afternoon, after stocks on Wall Street suffered their largest daily decline since the start of the war, he added another 10 days to the clock, again seeking to ease the fears ignited by his own hardline positions. It is too soon to know whether the extra time will result in productive diplomacy, but it is already clear that Mr. Trump's wild swings from optimism to frustration and anger, from de-escalation to escalation, have combined to give his management of the war an erratic, make it up as it goes feel. Ever since the United States, alongside Israel, launched the war on February 28th, Mr. Trump has vacillated between chest thumping about U.S. military superiority and deep frustration that the tactical achievements on the battlefield did not seem to be producing the strategic outcome he predicted. Although the supreme leader and many top military intelligence leaders have been killed, the regime in Tehran remains in control. Iran's leaders have all but sealed off the Strait of Hormuz, sending gas prices skyrocketing and rattling investors. And Iran retains control of the material it would need to produce a nuclear weapon, the main threat cited by Mr. Trump in taking the nation into the war in the first place. Mr. Trump has said he understands there would be short-term pain from the war, which he accepts as a necessary price to ensure that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And the president's allies have always said that his unpredictability is his superpower and that it keeps his enemies guessing. But it also suggests an inconsistency of purpose that has led the president to keep shifting his goals, even as the risks of the war grow bigger by the day. Mr. Trump spends his days immersed in the war, receiving several briefings a day, either in the Oval Office or the Situation Room. Some of the briefings include a short montage video of less than a minute. White House officials say primarily raw footage of military strikes that the U.S. Central Command also shares on X. When Mr. Trump is deliberating a decision, he goes around the room and asks his advisors what they think. Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, said the president makes every decision with the same goal: victory. He understands that these sorts of things throughout history are untimely, judged by the outcome, Mrs. Leavitt said, and the president knows that at the end of this, when we are able to declare that the Iranian terrorist regime no longer poses a threat to the United States military, that is going to be a legacy-making, history-marking moment. Mr. Trump gets military advice from two main sources: Defense Secretary Pete Hedges and General Dan Kane. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mr. Hedges, is the president's go-to when it comes to publicly defending military policies, U.S. officials say. But General Kane, a former Air Force F-16 fighter pilot and Pentagon liaison to the CIA, is the military's Trump whisperer, its main interlocutor with the president on operational matters. Pentagon and White House officials say Mr. Trump has developed a good rapport and strong personal trust with the low-key General Kane, whom he plucked from retirement to be chairman after General Charles Q. Brown Jr. was fired in early 2025. Before the war started, General Kane briefed Mr. Trump on an array of options, including some that he said would strain U.S. munitions stocks and risk American casualties. General Kane does not advocate one option or another in Situation Room discussions. U.S. officials say instead he lays out the risks, benefits, and consequences. That occasionally puts General Kane in a difficult position. Late last month, in the run-up to the war, Mr. Trump said General Kane believed that any eventual military action order against Iran would be something easily won. But that is not what General Kane had told Mr. Trump and other senior advisors. The disconnect underscores just how much the Iran war is testing Mr. Trump's usual strategy for dealing with crisis, imposing his own reality and disregarding inconvenient truths. He thinks everything is transactional. He can deal with the deal one step at a time and see how things unfold. But war is fast, uncontrollable, unpredictable, and deadly, said Julian E. Zelzer, a Princeton history professor and the editor of a book of essays about Mr. Trump's first term. He's doing the same technique he always does, threatening people, insulting people, seizing attention to what he wants to say. He's learning that it doesn't always work, he added. He's doing the art of the deal in a way that's just creating chaos. During his first term, Mr. Trump seemed more hesitant to use the force of the U.S. military. In 2019, he approved strikes against Iran only to call the operation off with minutes to spare, citing the possibility of Iranian casualties. John Bolton, Mr. Trump's former national security advisor who has supported aggressive military aggression against Iran, included regime change, recalled that Mr. Trump had seemed uncomfortable in his first term with the idea of striking Syria, which was using chemical weapons on its own people. He wanted it to look like it was a strong response, but not really be that strong, said Mr. Bolton, who has become one of the president's most vocal critics. Now, after campaigning on a promise to keep America out of foreign entanglements, Mr. Trump is embracing American military might, and with the war in Iran at least, he has been far more matter-of-fact about possibility that there could be American casualties. He dispatched B-2 bombers to strike Iran's nuclear facilities in June. He launched a raid in January that resulted in the capture of President Nicolás Maduro of Venezuela. And U.S. forces have blown dozens of boats out of the water in the Caribbean, killing more than 160 people in what the Trump administration says is an operation to combat drug smuggling. His operation in Iran is far more complex, less popular, and deadlier for American forces than those operations. So far, 13 U.S. service members have died. Mr. Trump has attended 2 dignified transfers, and Ms. Leavitt has said that Mr. Trump considers it the most important, yet the hardest part of his job as commander-in-chief. The father of one fallen soldier recently recounted the pleasant surprise of Mr. Trump's emotion and humanity during a meeting. At the same time, Mr. Trump insists that he is doing what no other president before him had the courage to do. We have unparalleled firepower, unlimited ammunition, and plenty of time. Which what happens to these deranged scumbags today? He wrote in a Truth Social post this month. They've been killing innocent people all over the world for 47 years. And now I, as the 47th President of the United States of America, am killing them. What a great honor it is to do so. Mr. Trump's cavalier attitude has shown cracks when he was pressed about the deadly Tomahawk missile strike on an Iranian elementary school in the opening day of the war. Mr. Trump first blamed Iran and then claimed he did not know enough about it. A preliminary inquiry has determined that the United States was responsible. The president, who was granted 5 determinants from being drafted to fight in Vietnam, including for a diagnosis of bone spurs, has often mused that he would be a good general. Earlier this month, he posted an old picture of himself in uniform at the New York's Military Academy, a notable choice as he launched a war. As the weeks have gone by, the goals and objectives that Mr. Trump laid out at the start of the war have changed. Earlier this month, as he said he was considering winding down military operations in Iran, Mr. Trump no longer mentioned the purpose of supporting regime change through a popular uprising, an objective he has set at the start. The war, like everything else that comes out of the White House, is a reflection of Donald Trump's very unique personality and leadership style, said Stephen M. Gillian, a historian and the author of Presidents at War: How World War II Shaped a Generation of Presidents. It's focused on him as a great man. It is vague. It's undisciplined. It's unfocused. Mr. Trump has explained some of his back and forth decisions in the war by referring to the lessons he learned before he entered into politics, back when he was a real estate developer in New York. You have to understand, Mr. Trump told an audience in Memphis last week, my whole life has been a negotiation. But Mr. Trump's allies see his decision to go to war as his duty as commander-in-chief. President Trump is acting like a wartime president should: decisive, unafraid to use his constitutional authority, and focused on protecting Americans rather than getting bogged down in the kind of endless and rudderless conflicts we saw under his predecessor, said Mike Davis, who leads the Article 3 Project, a conservative advocacy group, and was an early supporter of Mr. Trump's war. Presidents don't need permission to defend the country, and the media and Democrats will do anything to delegitimize Operation Epic Fury, he said. President Trump's legacy won't be judged on process or polls, but on whether he succeeds in neutralizing the Iran threat and making Americans safer. Still, the conflict is deeply unpopular with the majority of Americans. The president chose to launch the war without first making the case to the American public or Congress, which perhaps contributed to the absence of a rally around the flag moment that many wartime presidents see. He has acknowledged that he has been advised against calling it a war because it did not seek congressional approval. So he prefers to call it an excursion. What? Aside from the question of congressional approval. Mr. Trump has failed to provide any evidence that Iran posed an immediate threat to the United States, and he has repeatedly moved the goalposts for success, even declaring victory while at the same time arguing that the mission was incomplete. He said he would accept nothing less than an end with the unconditional surrender of Iran, a condition that his aides have said is up to his discretion. Mr. Trump is not the first president to put forth a lofty yet elusive goal. President Franklin D. Roosevelt called for the unconditional surrender during World War II. It is one of the few similarities between how the two approach war. When Roosevelt announced the unconditional surrender goal in World War II, it was not well thought through and not fully coordinated with his team or his allies, said Peter Feaver, an advisor to President George W. Bush on national security strategy and now a professor at Duke University who has studied how presidents lead in wartime. I would not be surprised if President Trump's announcement of unconditional surrender matched Roosevelt's in that regard. But Roosevelt cultivated something that has eluded Mr. Trump. Powerful allies, namely Winston Churchill, with whom he coordinated his aggressive military strategy. Mr. Trump has instead alienated and threatened his allies for not joining the war effort. He has targeted most of his ire at Prime Minister Keir Starmer of Britain, declaring that Mr. Starmer is no Winston Churchill. We don't need people that join wars after we've already won, Mr. Trump wrote on March 7th. But now, with another deadline looming for Iran to fully open the Strait of Hormuz into shipping or face devastating strikes on its power plants, Mr. Trump has a decision to make about the next steps in a war that he estimated at the onset will last 4 to 5 weeks. The war has now been going on for nearly a month. Mr. Trump is ratcheting up pressure on Iran to accept a U.S. proposal to end the war, even as he sends more troops to the Middle East and warns Iranians that we'll just keep blowing them away if they don't make a deal. Iran has publicly rejected the overtures, though it has privately signaled some willingness. They'll tell you, we're not negotiating, Mr. Trump said. Of course, they're negotiating. They'll be liberated. On Friday evening, during remarks at a finance conference in Miami Beach for Saudi Arabia's Sovereign Investment Fund, Mr. Trump boasted how Iran was begging to make a deal and how the United States operation was helping ensure that the very powerful nation of Saudi Arabia would be safe. While he was speaking, U.S. officials confirmed that Iran had struck a naval base in Saudi Arabia where U.S. service members were stationed. 12 Americans were injured in the attack, which amounted to one of the most serious breaches of American air defenses in the course of the war. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Democratic Youth Movement is attracting older voters in Maine race. Nettie Nelson, 76, has seen the ads for Graham Plattner, the 41-year-old Democrat running for Senate in Maine. She was intrigued by Mr. Plattner's focus on the needs of working people, but unsure about his gruff demeanor. So Miss Nelson, who lives in Clinton, Maine, drove to a coffee shop in nearby Skowhegan with her husband, Bob, on a recent Saturday to hear Mr. Plattner in person. With Maine's Democratic primary 2 months away, Ms. Nelson is carefully weighing her choices. Older women like her are among the most reliable primary voters in the country, and they will almost certainly play a key role in choosing which Democratic challenger will take on Senator Susan Collins, the Republican who has held the seat for 3 decades, in November. But the showdown between Mr. Plattner, an oyster farmer and Iraq War veteran with a populist message, and Governor Janet Mills, 78, a seasoned moderate from a political family, is playing out amid a nationwide generational rebellion in the Democratic Party. The Plattner-Mills battle is among the highest profile examples of the shift which has chased household names like Nancy Pelosi and Richard J. Durbin from Congress, put incumbents such as Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts on their toes, and signaled to the party's field of 2028 presidential aspirants that young voters will demand a voice. The irony in Maine, the state with the oldest population in the country, may be that many older voters are drawn to the party's youth movement too. It's hard to say it, but I don't really want to vote for someone as old as Janet Mills, said Lucy Leaf, 79, a Democratic voter from Ellsworth, Maine. I just think we need a fresh look on everything. I can agree to that. In more than 24 interviews across Maine this month, many older women said they had voted for Ms. Mills in the past and appreciate her handling of the pandemic and her tough stance against President Trump. Some also spoke admiringly of the barrier she broke as the first woman to serve as Maine's governor and before that Attorney General. Yet for many women in their 60s and beyond, a group that could be seen as likely supporters of Ms. Mills, the choice is not yet clear. While they respect the governor, many said that her age was a factor in their deliberations, along with their growing conviction that new leadership, energy, and ideas are essential for meeting what they view as a moment of crisis in the country. She has a lot of experience, Ms. Nelson said of Ms. Mills, looking pensive as she settled into an armchair of Mr. Plattner's event in Skowhegan. Is that good? Dozens of people, including many with gray hair, had come to hear Mr. Plattner speak. Ms. Nelson sipped from a can of 7-Up and listened closely as the candidate described politics as a performance of the elite. By the time Mr. Plattner was 16 minutes into his stump speech, talking about blue-collar workers who can afford to send their children to college, a tenfold increase in the number of billionaires, and a fight against fascism that demands regular people take back power, Ms. Nelson had risen to her feet, a faint smile on her lips. Raised in a family that goes back to the 1700s in the region, she was the only one of 6 siblings to go to college. Money was one reason. She worked for 29 years in hospital payroll and benefits when a merger threatened her job. She found work in a local school for another 20 years. I agree with everything he said, Ms. Nelson said after Mr. Plattner finished. Whether he can get it done is another story. Ms. Mills will need older voters, particularly women, to make up for Mr. Plattner's lead among younger people and men. A poll last month by the University of New Hampshire found Mr. Plattner's leading by 57 percentage points among men and by 24 points among women. Ms. Mills had a narrow advantage over Mr. Plattner among voters 65 and older, where she led 49 to 45%. One of the highest profile older women backing Mr. Plattner hails from a neighboring state, Massachusetts. Senator Elizabeth Warren, 78, endorsed him on March 19th. The battle for women's votes intensified after Governor Mills' campaign released an ad attacking Mr. Plattner for comments he made on Reddit more than a decade ago, saying women should take responsibility and act like an adult to avoid being sexually assaulted. Ooh. After her campaign rallied women leaders from around the state to condemn him, Mr. Plattner quickly assembled his own lineup of women to speak in taking responsibility for his past and grown as a person. Women interviewed said the ad had not swayed them. I admired that he owned up and said, yes, I did that. And I'm not the same person that I was, said Cokie Giles, 70, a Plattner supporter and retired nurse from Brewer. Ms. Mills, appearing via Zoom at a Democratic forum in Ellsworth, defended the ad, saying voters deserve to know which candidate will be most vulnerable to the merciless attacks that Republicans will mount against the eventual Democratic nominee. Rob Glover, an associate professor of political science at the University of Maine, said women will play key roles in the primary both as voters and as campaign volunteers. If they prove to be turned off by Mr. Plattner's past, it would hit his operation hard. When you look at the campaigns and who's doing the work, it's overwhelmingly women, he said. They're the ones who show up and get people elected. Several women said they were less concerned about Mr. Plattner's past and more focused on his lack of political experience. At a protest in Bangor outside the federal building that houses Senator Collins' office, Nancy Jacobson, 67, an undecided voter, said she liked Mr. Plattner's ideas, but wished he were running for the House, which has two-year terms, so voters could give him a trial run. I think he's outgrown his past, but he has some dirt, and I would like to see him gain experience before we hand him 6 years in the Senate, she said. Another undecided voter on the sidewalk, Joan Rickard of Brewer, said she had one goal: to figure out which Democrat could beat Senator Collins, who is 73. Wow. Ms. Rickard, 78, said she had written to Ms. Mills in recent months to thank her for standing up to Mr. Trump. She's really shown a backbone, Ms. Rickard said. I told her, I like what you're doing. I loved see you in court, but I'm 78, and see you in court, but I'm 78, and so are you. I wish you were younger. Miss Mills' long tenure may hurt her with some voters, but in a state where she is widely known as Janet, familiarity can also be an asset. Julia Reed, 43, of Waterville, said she is not supporting Mr. Plattner because she knows nothing about him. She would vote for Miss Mills instead. Some women said they had been turned off by positions the governor has taken during her 2 terms. A half dozen said they objected to her veto in 2023 of a bill that would have helped Maine tribes access federal benefits. Several who work as nurses said they believe Ms. Mills had undermined their unsuccessful fight 2 years ago to set statewide nurse-to-patient ratios. Ms. Mills also opposed efforts to passed a red flag law after a mass shooting in Lewiston in 2023. Voters ultimately approved the law, which allows families to petition a judge to remove guns from relatives with mental health issues in a statewide referendum last fall. Most women who supported Mr. Plattner said it was his message that had swayed them most, especially his call for universal health care and his focus on the needs of working people. The latter theme struck a chord with Lisa Sabatine, 67, at Georgetown, a school psychologist whose 2 young adult children are unable to think seriously about buying a home, she said. Even though they work in their part-time works, it also resonated for Miss Nelson, the undecided voter at Mr. Plattner's event in Scobel, who said that she was nearly certain that she would vote for him. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, she said. Our children are not doing as well as we did. Life happens. Expect the unexpected. Floorliner HP. Protect your vehicle with defense made to handle whatever comes your way. Our laser-measured Floorliner HP works hard so you don't have to. WeatherTech.com. Auto, home, pet. Find your fit. 1-800-441-6287. Plastic no more. Paper boxes, paper mailers, paper bags. Pratt 100% recycled. www.prattindustries.com. Skechers performs. Designed to cut through the wind. Skechers Aero Burst. Skechers slips-on. Skechers slip-ins. Goodyear Performance outsoles. Skechers Hyper Burst. Skechers Arch Fit. The locket you'll want to wear every day, and you can. The Slim Locket Collection in 18-karat gold or sterling silver. Monica Rich Kazan. Please call 866-598-2784 or visit us at monicarichkazan.com. Photographs. Signature auction April 7th. Heritage Auctions. View all lots and bid at ha.com/8255. Inquiries, call 212-486-3500. Highlights Preview, March 30th through August 2nd, 445 Park Avenue, New York, New York, 10022. Echo Drive for a Cleaner Planet, powered by Any Light. Experience our legacy of light. This Earth Month from April 15th through April 30th, every Eco Drive watch sale helps support Units to Light through our membership with For the Planet, Citizen, Your Watch. In memorandum. In the New York Times. To honor your loved one in these pages, contact us. 1-800-458-5522. The New York Times. To honor your loved ones in these pages. The New York Times. On the job, out in the world. Provide a company-wide subscription to the Times. NewYorkTimes.com. Company-wide. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Sunday, March 29th, 2026 issue of the front section of the New York Times. We read from the front section of the New York Times every Sunday at 1 p.m. Your reader has been Janice Marie Hunt. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of the New York Times opinion page. Following that, at 3 o'clock, the New York Times Arts and Leisure. And at 4 o'clock, a rebroadcast of this morning's Buffalo News. Radio Reading mails out a large print program schedule to our listeners every other month. If you have not received a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service large print program schedule in the mail, please call us at 716-821-5555. We will make sure that you receive one every other month. A Braille version of the schedule is also available upon request. Our number again is 716. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability